My name's Jessica Monroe. I'm 34 years old. You don't belong here, Jessica. Not in this house. Not in this family. My mother says it out loud like it's a casual fact, the same way she might say the chicken is overcooked or the weather's been humid lately. The room falls quiet. Forks pause mid-air. Even my cousins stop pretending to care about their phones. The air inside the dining room thickens like someone just shut the windows and locked the doors. It's my mother's birthday. 65. A full Southern spread on the table candles deviled eggs, cornbread-framed photos from decades past. Family from Charleston, Myrtle Beach, Columbia, all gathered under one roof. And I'm the ghost standing in the middle of it. I glance around at the faces aunts who never called uncles, who once said I was two strange siblings who told me I think I'm better than everyone because I don't have kids. No one says anything. No one ever says anything when she speaks like that. Inside, something fractures. Not loudly, not like glass shattering. It's quieter than that. A clean, silent snap. I swallow, nod once, and set my water glass down. My hands don't shake. Not anymore. I've been called worse by better. Still it stings. It always does, even when I pretend it doesn't. My mother stares at me, eyes sharp and cold, across the birthday table. She's always hated my silence, mistook it for arrogance. What she never understood was that silence is what kept me alive. I was 24 when I signed the first non-disclosure agreement that changed my life. Now I'm 34 and I carry a Pentagon-issued encrypted phone that never leaves my side. My job title doesn't exist on any website. My ID badge opens doors under layers of security most civilians never know exist. But to them, I'm still the odd daughter. The quiet one. The one who never smiled enough. The one who thinks she's too good for church. I breathe once, then again. That's when I hear the front door open. Boots, 2 sets, heavy, purposeful. I don't turn. But I know the rhythm. I memorized it a decade ago. 2 men walk into the house. They're not dressed in uniform, but I can see it in the way they stand. Shoulders squared, eyes scanning. One of them nods at me. "Ma'am," he says quietly, "we need you. Now." My mother's jaw tightens. Her fork drops. "What is this?" she snaps. "What now, Jessica?" I look at her. My voice is calm, almost gentle. "Excuse me. Duty calls." And just like that, I walk away from the table, from the family that never saw me, toward the life that always did. It's strange, really, how a single sentence can unravel decades. You don't belong here. The thing is, she said it before. Not always in those exact words, but in the way she'd shift her body away from me at church. In how she'd light up when my younger sister Haley walked into a room but barely lift her eyes when I arrived home from college. In how she never introduced me with pride, just with distance. This is Jessica. She's in Washington, like I was some distant relative with a vague government job. Not a daughter. Certainly not her daughter. I used to think if I worked harder, if I proved myself with medals, credentials, and clearances, maybe she'd finally look at me the way she looked at Haley. But the truth is, no amount of service to this country could ever soften the stone lodged in her chest when it came to me. I was born in Columbia, South Carolina. My dad, Richard Monroe, was Air Force intelligence. My mother, Eleanor, was a retired teacher turned house matriarch, the kind of woman who ironed napkins and believed a woman's worth was in how softly she smiled and how fast she got married. I was neither soft nor married. By the time I turned 15, I knew 2 things for certain I wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps, even if he rarely spoke about the work he did. My mom had already decided I was a disappointment. Dad passed when I was 19. A quiet heart attack while deployed on a liaison tour overseas. I wasn't even told where. Just a folded flag and a funeral I couldn't cry at because I had to stay composed for Mom. She wept loudly, cursed the military, clung to Haley. And me. I stood silently beside the casket, staring at the silver oak leaf insignia folded inside his service ribbon, and whispered, "I'll make it mean something." 2 years later, I graduated top of my class from George Washington University double major in cryptography and applied linguistics. While my classmates chased corporate jobs and grad school, I enlisted as a civilian contractor with the Department of Defense working under the Cyber Warfare and Signals Intelligence Task Force. It was brutal, isolating, but I thrived in that silence because the silence was familiar. I stopped coming home often after that, not because I didn't love my family, but because they made it impossible to breathe. Every visit was an interrogation. You still not dating anyone? What do you do again? Why do you always look so tired? Jessica. No one asked about my work in Serbia, where I decrypted a transmission that prevented a bomb from detonating in a NATO convoy. No one knew I'd been tapped for an interagency intel summit to present threat analysis on new cyber infiltration methods. They didn't even ask. Mom just complained that I never brought casserole. Haley, on the other hand, flourished in their world. She married a youth pastor, had 3 kids by 30, taught art at the local elementary school, wore floral dresses to every holiday. She and Mom were inseparable. Brunches, Bible study, weekly trips to Target. I used to envy them not because I wanted Haley's life, but because she never had to earn love. She just had it. And the harder I tried to make sense of that, the more invisible I became. I once told my supervisor at the Pentagon, a steely woman named Carla Voss, about my mother in passing. She'd tilted her head and said, "Let me guess she doesn't believe in what you do." I laughed. "She doesn't even believe I do anything." Carla's voice went flat. Sometimes the people closest to us can't grasp the scale of who we are. It terrifies them. That stuck with me. And every time my mother cut me off in a conversation or dismissed my success with a bored sigh, I reminded myself she's not terrified of me. She's terrified of not being able to define me. So when I received the invitation to her birthday party, I hesitated. I almost tossed it. But something stopped me. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe a part of me, the smallest shard still holding out hope, wanted to be seen just once. Wanted her to say, "I'm proud of you." I was wrong. I didn't expect a miracle. But I didn't expect that either. To be told I didn't belong, in front of everyone. As if decades of service sacrifice and silence hadn't earned me the right to sit at her table. When the 2 men appeared at the party, I recognized them instantly. They weren't just from the department. They were from a Black Ops Shadow division I'd worked with in Bahrain, the one where your name is erased the moment you're recruited, the one that only knocks when something's gone deeply, catastrophically wrong. Their presence meant one thing: I'd been activated, and the fact that they came here, it wasn't just about urgency. It was deliberate. Someone knew what I was walking into and chose that moment to pull me out. I didn't look back as I stepped into the hallway. The guests parted like a tide. Haley reached for me, but I didn't stop. At the door, one of the men handed me a sealed folder. Red tape. Top-level encryption. I opened it. My eyes scanned the code word at the top: Operation Widow's Lantern. My blood ran cold. This was bigger than I thought. Far bigger. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. I felt seen. The helicopter lifted off from the edge of the park near the house. I didn't look back. Inside, the air was cold and dry. The agents Reed and Lovell said nothing until we hit altitude. Briefing in 5, Lovell muttered, handing me a headset and screen. My hands moved by instinct. Encryption, clearance, scan. But part of me was still frozen at that dining room table, at the sound of her voice. The dismissal. "You don't belong here." She said it so easily, like she believed it, like it had been waiting in her throat for years. And yet, as the rotor blades thundered around us and the mission loaded on my screen, I felt something shift, not a crack, but a turn. I knew now this was the beginning of the divide, the permanent kind. Operation Widow's Lantern, domestic infiltration threat, internal compromise suspected, southern region. I scanned the overview, heart beating faster with every line. Code red level concern, civilian network penetration, high potential for familial vectors data and access leaks originating from individuals close to national security staff. My breath caught. Familial vectors, I'd seen the term before in counter-intel white papers, but never in an active op. It meant this wasn't just espionage. It was personal. They debriefed me at a black site 2 hours outside D.C., a facility I'd visited only once before. The director, a gaunt man named Hartfield, laid out the case in clinical precision. My job tracked potential domestic exposure paths, targeted focus analysts, contractors, and military liaisons with deeply embedded civilian relatives, and the first compromised party. My heart thudded when the photo came up on screen. Haley Emerson, my sister. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Haley's image was captured through security footage, grocery store baby on her hip, Bluetooth in her ear. Innocent, familiar, ordinary. But the metadata told another story. Repeated encrypted call attempts traced to a burner device, VPN masking with routing through a known foreign node, and most damning contact with a community counselor who, upon investigation, held falsified credentials and fake licensure under 3 different aliases. The counselor had also appeared in other flagged files involving attempted data phishing from defense families. Haley wasn't the leak, but she was close to one. Very close. I sat with it all night in the debriefing chamber. No sleep, no appetite. Just the dull hum of fluorescent lights and the kind of cold you feel in your teeth. Part of me wanted to scream. The other part, my training, started building walls. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I had to protect her first, and that meant doing what I'd always done best, disappear behind the work. They assigned me a ghost alias Kite Echo and rerouted my credentials to avoid internal trace. I wasn't even Jessica Monroe anymore. Not on paper. I embedded myself in the investigation. Every morning I tracked familial metadata across open-source communications and dark web forums. I traced call logs, decoded disguised message structures, and listened to hundreds of hours of audio in whispered Vietnamese and fractured English. The deeper I went, the more threads I pulled. It wasn't just Haley. It was a network. Southern mothers in book clubs, dads coaching Little League, cousins working IT jobs with casual access to encrypted family laptops. They weren't spies. They were leverage points. And something was watching them all. I remember one night I was knee-deep in audio logs when I heard it. A voice. Clear, male, low. She doesn't even know what she's sitting on. Get it through the sister. Quietly. The date stamp matched a call Haley had received the same afternoon I visited Mom's house. It wasn't her voice on the call, but it was her phone. The realization hollowed me out. I closed the laptop, sat back in the chair, let the ceiling blur. All this time, I'd tried to earn my family's trust by protecting them. And now it looked like I had to protect the country from them. I briefed Hartfield the next morning. I'm not recusing myself, I told him. If anything, I'm the only one who can do this without tipping her off. He raised an eyebrow. You sure you're ready? I nodded. Because in that moment, I wasn't Jessica the daughter or Jessica the sister. I was Wraithlight again, and I had a job to do. Still, there were moments where the weight hit harder than I could admit. Once during an intel sync at headquarters, I spotted a family having lunch in the courtyard, a mother-father, 2 kids sharing milkshakes and fries. The boy couldn't have been older than 6. He had his mother's eyes, and for a second I envied her. Not because she belonged, but because she didn't have to belong in a world like mine. But this was my war, and wars aren't always fought on battlefields. Sometimes they're fought in dining rooms, with silence, with secrets, with the people who raised you. And sometimes, the ones you die to protect are the same ones who never looked you in the eye. The deeper I dug, the more unrecognizable Haley became to me. I wasn't angry, not in the way most people might expect. I didn't feel betrayal in the dramatic soap opera sense. No shattered plates, no screaming at walls. Instead, I felt something far worse. I felt invisible. Here I was, risking everything, my position, my clearance, my peace of mind, just to keep her safe, and she didn't even know I existed beyond being the awkward older sister who worked in D.C. In the few social media posts she had left public, I wasn't mentioned. Not at the birthday parties, not at Thanksgiving, not even in the family photo she'd posted last Christmas with the caption, "So grateful for my whole heart." I wasn't in the picture. One night, I sat at my desk in the Black Site compound staring at her phone records again. That same unknown number had called her 3 times last week, each time right after her counseling sessions. The metadata showed no immediate flags, no direct voice capture. But the digital fingerprints, I recognized them. The pattern matched a foreign intelligence method we'd intercepted in a joint NATO sweep 3 years ago. Except now, they were smarter. They weren't using operatives. They were using mothers, wives, sisters. They were infiltrating through vulnerability, not ideology, and Haley, sweet trusting underestimated Haley, was sitting right in the middle of it. I was ordered not to make contact, but I broke protocol. It wasn't some grand rebellious moment. It was 2:00 a.m. I was exhausted, and the ache in my chest felt heavier than the classified terminal in front of me. So I called her. Just her personal cell. Just once. She answered sleepily. "Hello." There was silence on my end. "Then it's me. Jessica," she asked, confused. "Why are you calling me so late? I should have said something. Asked her how the kids were, warned her to be careful, but all I said was I need you to stop meeting with that counselor. Don't ask me why. Just stop." A beat passed, then the click of a disconnection. She hung up. The next morning, I was pulled from the case. A silent review, internal affairs. I sat through the debrief like I was watching someone else's life unravel. "You compromised objectivity," the investigator said flatly. "You made unauthorized contact with a potential link. You crossed the line." And just like that, my clearance was suspended. No badge, no access, no mission. They didn't even give me a ride home. I took a cab from a secure facility, staring out the window as Virginia blurred by. The driver asked if I was okay. I lied. Home was quieter than I remembered. The apartment in Arlington felt sterile without the hum of encrypted comms or the steady rhythm of coded alerts. I stood in my kitchen, the same one I'd barely used in years, and tried to remember what regular people did when they weren't chasing ghosts through firewalls. I made tea. It got cold before I touched it. That night, I opened a drawer and pulled out a box I hadn't opened in years, my father's medals kept neatly wrapped in cloth. There was one letter inside I hadn't read since his funeral. His handwriting was sharp, decisive. "Jessica, you were never meant to be soft. That doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're forged." I held the letter for a long time, and for the first time in years I cried, not because I was weak, but because I'd forgotten I was human. Days passed in silence. No one from work called. No messages from Haley. I became a ghost in my own life. Until one afternoon, an envelope slid under my door. No name. No return address. Just a piece of paper with a printed screenshot of a chat log. "Unknown. She's out. Temporarily. We can use the sister now. Target. Are you sure she won't come back unknown? By the time she does, we'll have what we need." I stared at it. They weren't just using Haley. They were planning on my absence. Counting on it. Because they thought I'd stay down. They thought I'd retreat. They forgot who I was. I dug out an old secure device I kept stashed in a false wall behind my bookshelf, an analog relic built before the modern traceability systems. I used it only once during an operation in Eastern Europe when a NATO diplomat was under threat. I activated it and pinged Carla Voss, my former supervisor. She answered within 2 rings. "Jess?" she said, surprised. "How did you? I need 5 minutes. "Off-grid," I said. "I have evidence of an ongoing breach, and I know how to stop it." There was a pause. Then her voice dropped into mission mode. "Location." The meeting was held in the back of an abandoned library 3 blocks from my apartment. Carla arrived wearing civilian clothes and no jewelry. She sat across from me scanning the packet of screenshots, call logs, and access metadata I'd assembled over the last 3 days. When she finished, she looked up. "You're still good?" she said. "I never stopped being good," I replied. "They just stopped trusting me." Her eyes softened. "I believe you. That was all I needed." She reinstated me quietly, not officially, not yet, but with enough access to reopen my clearance. I was back in. No longer for validation. No longer to win anyone over. Now it was about saving someone who didn't even know they needed saving. I wasn't sure Haley would ever thank me, but that wasn't the point. The point was this: I belonged somewhere. Maybe not at my mother's table, but definitely in this fight. And I was ready to finish it. The first thing I did after Carla left was plug back into the world I knew best. Encrypted servers, passive trace lines, pattern trackers, digital shadows. That's where I felt like myself again, not a daughter, not a failure, not some awkward outsider at a party, but a tactician. A ghost who could move between lines of code and pull apart lies without being seen. Only this time, the mission wasn't theoretical. This time, the breach had a name, a face. And that face belonged to my sister. Haley still didn't know I was back online. She still believed I'd been suspended and silenced. That, in itself, was leverage. It meant I could move without setting off alarms. So I began with her counselor, the so-called supportive listener who had inserted themselves into Haley's life just 6 months prior. Their trail was expertly hidden, but not enough. I traced the license they used to register their email and found it linked to 2 other identities across 3 southern states, all paper-thin shells connected to mental wellness grants funded by shell charities with offshore donors. Classic foreign intel obfuscation. But what chilled me was the profile of their targets: single mothers, spouses of government workers, veterans' families, people emotionally vulnerable but adjacent to power, people like Haley. I had 2 options. Option 1, expose the counselor now and shut down the node immediately. Option 2, let it play out, watch it deeper. Let them believe they were winning until I found all of them. I chose the second, painfully, strategically. This meant I had to watch Haley spiral, knowing I couldn't tell her why. And she was spiraling. I intercepted messages between her and the counselor growing darker in tone. Isolation tactics. Undermining her trust in her husband, suggesting her children might be in danger because of what her sister does for the government. They were weaponizing me, and it was working. At one point, Haley messaged the counselor Jessica called me. Out of nowhere. Told me to stop seeing you. It was weird. I think she's spying on me or something. And the reply, she's not who you think she is. And you're safer with us. That hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Safer. With strangers who were manipulating her. With voices she couldn't even verify. Meanwhile, the one person who had spent her life protecting her, even if from afar, was cast as the villain. Still, I didn't blame her. Haley wasn't malicious, just blind. She'd spent her life being loved, easily accepted, effortlessly. So when that affection came wrapped in poison, she drank it with a smile. But that's the thing about poison, it leaves a trail. And I was going to follow it to the source. Carla authorized a ghost team to support me 2 cyber analysts and a field tech with surveillance credentials. Together, we built a sting. I planted a synthetic vulnerability, a mock transmission embedded in a document Haley was likely to download on her phone. Innocuous on the surface, an old family video labeled Dad's retirement tape. It was designed to look accidental, sent from a burner account impersonating our cousin Caleb. The counselor encouraged her to open it. And when they did, we caught their IP. It traced back to a compound in rural North Carolina. Isolated. Off-grid. The feds raided it 2 nights later. 12 operatives. 5 laptops. Dozens of hard drives filled with social engineering blueprints. It wasn't just Haley. There were hundreds of families being profiled, mapped, lured. It was the most sophisticated domestic-facing intel operation I'd ever seen. And it nearly broke my sister without her ever knowing it. The aftermath wasn't clean. Haley was questioned, not accused, but shaken. She realized painfully that the people who'd told her I was the threat had been lying from the start. She called me that night. Her voice was raw. I didn't know, she said. I never thought. I didn't let her finish. None of us did, Hales. That's the point. There was silence. Then a whisper. They used me to get to you, didn't they? I closed my eyes. Yes. That was the first honest conversation we'd had in years. It didn't fix everything, but it cracked something open. She asked me to come home to talk in person, said Mom wanted to see me too. I didn't believe that last part, but I said I'd think about it, because maybe, just maybe, there was something worth salvaging. That night, I stood on my apartment balcony looking out over the lights of Arlington. The air smelled like coming rain. I thought of my father, of how he'd always told me, "You won't be celebrated for the things you do, Jess." But you'll sleep at night, and that matters. He was right. I wouldn't be toasted at galas or photographed at award ceremonies, but tonight, a dozen families would sleep safer because I kept going when no one believed in me. And my sister, she finally saw me not just as the quiet one, but as the protector I had always been. I arrived back in Columbia on a gray Thursday afternoon. The town hadn't changed, still lined with old brick churches and pecan trees shedding their leaves like secrets. Haley picked me up at the station, and for a long while we drove in silence. She kept glancing at me like she was seeing me for the first time and still didn't quite know what to do with that. She finally spoke. "Mom asked if you'd come by. For dinner." I raised an eyebrow. Asked, Haley's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. Begged is a stretch. But she didn't say no. That's the most diplomatic translation of my mother's emotional language I'd heard in years. I sighed. "You sure that's a good idea?" "No," Haley admitted. "But I think it's a necessary one." We pulled into our childhood driveway just before dusk. The house looked exactly as I remembered: white shutters, faded flag on the porch, a porch swing that creaked like it held every memory we never talked about. I paused before getting out of the car. My heart shouldn't have been pounding like this, not after everything I'd faced, but it was, because this was the battlefield that shaped me, and it was finally time to walk back into it. Mom was in the kitchen, still wearing her apron like a badge of honor, still slicing green beans like they owed her money. She didn't look up when I walked in. Haley touched my arm and disappeared down the hall, leaving us alone. The silence was unbearable. "I heard you were back in town," Mom said, voice even. "I'm here," I replied. I didn't know what else to say. She kept chopping methodically. "You've caused quite a stir." I leaned against the counter. I prevented a foreign intel breach that was targeting American families, one of them being yours. That finally made her pause. She set the knife down. "Is that what you do now, spy on your family?" My jaw clenched. "No, I protect them. Even when they don't want me to." She turned to me, then really turned eyes sharp and still full of that old judgment. "You always think you know better than everyone else, Jessica." I didn't flinch, not this time, and you always assumed I was a stranger just because I didn't fit your mold. Her lips thinned. "I never said that. You didn't have to." The silence returned, but this time it wasn't brittle, it was heavy. I continued. "All these years I tried to earn your respect. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I did something important enough, maybe you'd see me." She looked away. "I don't understand the world you live in. I never asked you to," I said, voice softening. "I just wanted you to understand me." She sat down at the kitchen table without a word. I joined her. Two soldiers from two different wars. Mine was fought in silence, hers in expectation. She stared at her hands. "You scared me." I blinked. "What?" "When you were little, you were quiet, so smart, too smart. You asked questions I couldn't answer, looked at people like you saw straight through them. I didn't know what to do with that. I stayed quiet. I knew you'd never need me. Not really. Not the way Haley did. And I think maybe I hated you for that. That landed like a blow, but somehow it also made sense." We sat for a long time without speaking. Then she did something I didn't expect. She reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm not good at saying things the right way. But I know you protected this family. I know you've done more than any of us realize. And I know I've made you feel small when you were the strongest one in the room. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly. But it was the closest thing she'd ever given me. And it was enough." Later that night, we sat on the porch swing, the same one I used to read on when I was 12. Haley joined us, bringing lemonade like we were some Norman Rockwell painting. We didn't talk about the mission or the people who almost destroyed us. We just talked, laughed even, about Dad's terrible cooking, about the time I accidentally reversed Mom's car into the mailbox and blamed it on a stray possum. It was awkward at first, but slowly. It became something that felt real. Something that felt like the beginning of a bridge we didn't know we were allowed to build. As I watched the sun dip below the horizon, I realized something. Maybe I didn't need to belong here in the way I thought I did. Maybe belonging wasn't about them accepting who I was. Maybe it was about me no longer hiding it. Haley looked at me after Mom went inside. "Are you going back?" I nodded. "Soon. There's always more work." She was quiet for a beat. "I'm proud of you. I know I don't say it enough. Or ever." That meant more than I could admit. "Thanks," I whispered. That night before I left, Mom handed me a worn envelope. It was sealed, yellowed with time. "My last letter from your father," she said. "I think it was always meant for you." I opened it on the train ride back to D.C. Inside was a single line. "Don't shrink for them, Jess. Make them rise to meet you." And I finally understood. My war wasn't about proving I belonged. It was about showing that I'd been here all along. It's strange how the most important battles of our lives don't make headlines. They don't end with ticker tape or medals or someone shaking your hand. Sometimes they end in silence, in the space where old wounds stop bleeding, in the simple act of being seen. When I stepped back into the Pentagon 2 weeks later, I wasn't the same woman who'd left. Not because my badge had been reinstated, not because I'd cracked one of the most insidious domestic intel threats in recent years, but because for the first time in years, I didn't need the clearance or the command to know my worth. I'd stopped waiting for permission. I no longer needed to be welcomed home. I was home inside myself. Carla met me at the main entrance. She was smiling, not her usual cold smirk, but something warmer, more grounded. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. "I've always been ready. They just didn't know it." She walked with me through the polished halls, nodding to a few passing officers who glanced at my name badge. Some of them stopped in their tracks, recognizing me not as a ghost in the system, but as the woman who had dismantled a threat embedded under their noses. There was something satisfying about that. Not revenge, not vindication, just quiet recognition. I was assigned a new role, Director of Civilian Intel Integration. It was the kind of position that came with its own office security suite and more pressure than oxygen, but I accepted it with calm clarity. Not to impress anyone, not to fill a void, but because I knew what it meant to be underestimated, and I was ready to build systems that ensured no one like me ever had to fight that same invisible war alone. I called Haley from the office that evening. She was at home cooking dinner with her kids, screaming in the background. I could hear the warmth in her voice even through the chaos. "I told Mom you got promoted," she said. I chuckled. "Let me guess," she said, "about time." She said, "I hope she has time to sit down once in a while." "That's as close as you're going to get." We both laughed, and then Haley's voice softened. "I'm glad you didn't give up on us, Jess. On me." I paused, the weight of years resting gently on my shoulders. "I didn't do it for thanks," I said. "I did it because I knew no one else could." A few days later, I received a small box in the mail. No return address. Inside was a pin and old military insignia from my father's unit. Along with it, a folded note written in shaky script. "You made the right choice. And you're still making them. Proud doesn't even begin to cover it." There was no signature, no indication of who sent it. But I knew, and I let the tears fall this time, not out of grief, but release. Some ghosts don't haunt us. Some walk beside us. Quiet, constant, proud. The final step came on a Sunday. I went to church with my mom and Haley. I hadn't been in years, but something told me this mattered not because I needed their rituals, but because I wanted to show up. The pastor gave a sermon about second chances, about the strength it takes to forgive not others but yourself. Afterward, Mom introduced me to a group of women from her prayer circle. "This is my daughter Jessica," she said. Pause. "The one who works at the Pentagon." And for the first time in my life, there was pride in her voice. Not performance, not rehearsed, just truth. We had dinner that evening on the porch. Nothing special. Fried chicken, sweet tea, fireflies blinking in the humid air. At one point, Haley brought out a stack of old photo albums. We flipped through birthdays, vacations, awkward school pictures. One photo caught my eye at age 12, sitting on this very swing with a book in my lap, eyes already too old for my age. "I used to think she looked lonely in that picture," Mom said. I replied, "but not in the way you think." She nodded slowly. I see that now. And she reached over, placed her hand over mine. I see you, Jess. That was it. Not some grand reconciliation. Not a dramatic outpouring, just one sentence. And somehow it was everything. I flew back to D.C. the next morning. As the plane rose above the clouds, I thought of the version of myself who'd once believed she had to prove her worth to be loved. The woman who mistook silence for failure, who carried the weight of invisibility like a second skin. And I said goodbye to her. Because now, when I walk into a room, whether it's a strategy meeting at the Pentagon or a porch swing in South Carolina, I carry something different. Not bitterness, not armor, but peace. So if you ever find yourself doubting your place, if someone ever tells you you don't belong here, remember this. Sometimes the places we're pushed away from aren't rejecting us. They're just not big enough to hold the weight of who we're becoming. And sometimes, just sometimes, when two men in uniform show up at your mother's birthday and whisper, "The Pentagon needs you now," that's not just a mission call. That's the world finally realizing you were never invisible. You were inevitable.